I was halfway through unwrapping a box of crystal glasses in the kitchen of the home I'd dreamed about for nearly 15 years when my phone rang, and a stranger spoke the words that destroyed everything I believed about my marriage. "Mrs. Lawson?" the elderly voice asked. "Yes." "My name is Harold Bennett. I owned your house before you did." I smiled automatically, expecting a question about forwarded mail or forgotten belongings. "I hope you're settling in." "We are," I replied. "It's a beautiful home." There was a long silence. Then his voice became quieter. "I need you to come see me today. Please don't tell your husband I'm the one who called. And whatever you do, come alone." The smile disappeared from my face. "I don't understand." "I will explain everything when you get here." Another pause. "I wish I were calling for a different reason, Mrs. Lawson." I tightened my grip on the phone. "What happened?" "I've seen something that you deserve to know before it's too late." The call ended before I could ask another question. For several seconds, I simply stood there, staring at the dark screen in my hand, while my heartbeat echoed inside my ears. Then I looked toward the living room. My husband, Adam, was laughing as he tried to hang a family portrait above the fireplace. His mother, Margaret, stood beside him with her arms folded, correcting every tiny adjustment he made. "A little higher," she said. "No, too much. There, that's perfect." Adam stepped back and admired it. "You always have the better eye." Margaret smiled proudly. "I've been decorating homes longer than you've been alive." They laughed together. Watching them, I felt almost guilty for allowing Harold Bennett's strange phone call to bother me. Adam had been my husband for 11 years. He was the man who stayed beside me while I sat through endless nights in the hospital with my father. He held my hand at my father's funeral. He cried with me when we packed away Dad's clothes. He celebrated with me when I finally received the inheritance my father had spent decades building through careful saving and wise investing. Without that inheritance, this house would never have existed. It wasn't a mansion, just a beautiful 2-story brick home in Franklin, Tennessee, with white shutters, a wraparound porch, and enough backyard space for the vegetable garden my father always dreamed of helping me build one day. Every corner reminded me of him. Every room felt like the future he'd wanted for me. I'd invested almost 70% of the purchase price using the money he left behind. The mortgage covered the rest. Adam contributed, but nowhere near what I had. None of that had ever mattered to me. Marriage wasn't supposed to be about percentages. It was supposed to be about building something together, or so I'd believed. "You okay?" Adam called. I looked up. He was smiling at me, the same smile that had once convinced me no matter what life threw at us, we'd face it together. "You've been staring into space." I forced a smile back, just tired. Margaret walked into the kitchen carrying another moving box. "I told you we should have hired movers to unpack everything." "I'm fine," I answered. "You're working too hard." She placed the box beside me before looking around the kitchen with unusual interest. "You know," she rested one hand against the marble countertop. "This room would look much larger if that pantry wall came out." I laughed politely. "We just moved in." "I'm only saying eventually." Adam nodded. "Actually, she's right." I looked at both of them. "When did you two start redesigning my kitchen?" "Our kitchen?" Adam corrected with a grin. "Our kitchen." It wasn't an argument. It wasn't even uncomfortable. Just another ordinary conversation between a husband, his wife, and an overly involved mother. At least. That's what I thought. "I need to run out for a while," I said suddenly. Adam glanced over. "For what?" I hadn't planned a lie. It simply appeared. "I forgot to pick up paint samples." He accepted the answer immediately. "No problem." Margaret smiled warmly. "Murat, we'll keep unpacking while you're gone." Something about the way she said "will" lingered in my mind longer than it should have. I grabbed my purse and keys before either of them asked another question. As soon as I climbed into my car, I locked every door without thinking. The engine remained off. My hands rested on the steering wheel while Harold Bennett's words replayed inside my head. "I've seen something you deserve to know." What could he possibly have seen? Maybe Adam had accidentally damaged something. Maybe there was a problem with the plumbing. Maybe the previous owner simply wanted to warn me about hidden repairs. I searched for ordinary explanations because ordinary explanations were easier. But somewhere beneath all those reasonable thoughts, something else began surfacing. Tiny memories. Moments I dismissed without another thought. Margaret insisting she attend every meeting during the home buying process. Adam encouraging me to let him handle the paperwork. The way Margaret always asked questions about my father's inheritance. The strange look they exchanged when the closing attorney explained ownership documents. Little things. Meaningless on their own. But now, they refused to stay buried. I started the car. Harold Bennett's new address was almost 30 minutes away on the opposite side of town. The drive felt longer. Every weird red light gave my imagination another opportunity to invent terrible possibilities. By the time I reached the quiet neighborhood where Harold now lived, my stomach had tied itself into knots. His small rental home sat at the end of a peaceful cul-de-sac. The lawn was perfectly trimmed. Flower pots lined the front porch. Everything about the place suggested a man who valued order. Before I could knock, the front door opened. Harold Bennett looked exactly as I remembered him from closing day. Tall despite his age, silver hair neatly combed, gentle eyes that somehow looked far older than 74. The moment he saw my face, he sighed deeply. "You came. You sounded frightened. I was." He stepped aside. "Please, come in." The house was quiet, spotlessly clean. A laptop already sat open on the dining room table beside 2 untouched cups of coffee. Harold noticed me looking at it. "I made yours the way you ordered it during closing." I blinked. "You remembered?" "I remember small things." His expression darkened. "I wish I'd remembered one more." I slowly took the seat across from him. The silence between us became almost unbearable. Finally, I asked, "What is this about?" Harold sat down across from me and folded his hands carefully. "Before I answer, I need you to promise me something." I nodded uncertainly. "Don't confront your husband after you leave here." I frowned. "What? Not today." His voice remained calm. "No matter what you see." A chill crawled across my arms. "You still haven't told me what this is." He looked at the laptop, then back at me. "When my wife was still alive, I installed a complete smart home security system throughout that house." I nodded. "The inspector mentioned there used to be one. I removed almost everything before the sale." He paused. "Almost." My heartbeat accelerated. There was one device I completely forgot. He reached into a drawer and removed a small external hard drive. It stayed connected to my private backup server. I stared at him without speaking. "A few days ago," he continued quietly, "my server notified me that someone had triggered motion inside the living room. I opened the recording, intending to disconnect it forever." He swallowed. I never expected to witness what happened next. My mouth had suddenly gone dry. "What did you see?" Harold looked genuinely uncomfortable. For a moment I thought he might refuse to answer. Instead, he slowly turned the laptop toward me, placed one finger over the keyboard, and quietly said the sentence that changed my life forever. "I think it's better if you hear your husband explain it himself." I don't remember reaching for the laptop. I don't remember taking a breath. I only remember the sound. Harold clicked the spacebar, and suddenly my living room appeared on the screen. The timestamp in the corner read Friday, 3:42 p.m. 4 days earlier. I had been sitting in a conference room across town, presenting quarterly reports to a room full of executives, completely unaware that my entire marriage was quietly unraveling inside the house I'd just purchased. The camera angle was unusual, high, almost hidden. It looked down across the living room from somewhere near the built-in bookshelves. The room was still half empty. Moving boxes lined one wall. A rolled-up rug rested beside the fireplace. Then the front door opened. Adam walked inside. He wasn't carrying groceries. He wasn't carrying tools. He was carrying a thick leather portfolio. A few seconds later, Margaret stepped inside behind him. She looked around the room slowly, almost proudly. Then she smiled. "I have to admit," she said, "it turned out even better than I expected." Adam laughed. "It'll be even nicer once everything's finally under our control." My fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Harold didn't say a word. He simply let the recording continue. Margaret walked into the center of the room and slowly turned in a circle. "I've already decided where the piano will go." Adam nodded. "And once the study becomes my office, the whole downstairs will finally make sense." My stomach twisted. My office? There wasn't supposed to be his office. We had discussed turning that room into a library. something my father had always wanted. Margaret rested her purse on one of the unopened boxes. Has Rebecca asked any questions? Adam shook his head confidently. Not one. Good. She still lets you handle everything? Every document. Margaret smiled with obvious satisfaction. I told you she'd never suspect anything. Adam shrugged. Why would she? She trusts me. The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were untrue. Because they were. I had trusted him. Completely. Harold quietly slid a box of tissues across the table. I hadn't realized tears were already running down my face. On the screen, Margaret opened one of our kitchen cabinets. She examined the shelves as though inspecting property she'd already purchased. I spoke with Karen yesterday. Adam looked up. What did she say? She has the revised trust package ready. Trust package? I frowned. That wasn't what Adam had mentioned. He'd told me the attorney was preparing routine ownership updates after closing. Nothing more. Margaret continued. The paperwork looks perfectly ordinary. Adam smiled. And Rebecca? She'll never read it. They both laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, just comfortably. Like two people discussing dinner reservations. I felt sick. Margaret reached into her purse and removed a folder. She opened it across the kitchen island. Once she signs these documents, the family trust automatically becomes the registered holding entity. Adam leaned closer. And after that, you'll become managing trustee, he nodded. And 6 months later? Margaret smiled. Control transfers naturally. No arguments. No courtroom. No ugly divorce. Everything stays inside the family. I stared at the screen. I wasn't hearing complicated legal language anymore. I was hearing the slow, careful theft of everything my father had worked his entire life to leave me. Adam looked toward the front window. You really think she'll never figure it out? Margaret didn't hesitate. Rebecca sees marriage as a partnership. People like her don't question paperwork handed to them by someone they love. Adam chuckled. That's one of the things I always admired about her. The words stabbed deeper than anything else. Not because they sounded affectionate, because they didn't. He wasn't admiring me. He was admiring how easy I was to deceive. Harold quietly looked away, giving me whatever privacy remained in that room. The recording continued. Margaret unfolded another document. This page is important, she tapped a paragraph. It authorizes the managing trustee to make financial decisions involving the property whenever they're considered beneficial to the trust. Adam studied it. So technically, I could refinance? Yes. Take equity? Yes. Sell the property? Margaret smiled. If it's in the trust's best interest. And Rebecca, she won't need to approve each decision. Adam leaned back. Perfect. My heartbeat became almost painfully loud. Perfect. That single word echoed inside my head. Perfect. Not because they wanted to protect me, because they believed they'd found the perfect way to take everything without me realizing it until it was too late. The recording jumped ahead several minutes. Margaret was now standing near the staircase. You'll have to be patient. Adam nodded. I know. If you move too quickly, she'll start asking questions. Exactly, Margaret folded her arms. You let the trust sit. It less way. You make small financial changes. You become the person everyone expects to handle the house. And one day, ownership becomes a technicality. Adam laughed. It's amazing how much people sign without reading. Margaret looked directly toward him. No. It's amazing how much people will sign. When the person asking wears a wedding ring. Neither of them noticed the hidden camera. Neither of them imagined every word was being preserved. They spoke with complete confidence, complete comfort, the confidence of people who believed they were alone. The footage continued for another 8 minutes. They discussed renovations, future investments, using the home's equity to purchase rental properties, moving money through the family trust. Every plan assumed one thing, that I would quietly sign whatever Adam placed in front of me. By the end, the house no longer felt like my home. It felt like the prize they'd been planning to win. Harold finally paused the recording. The room became painfully silent. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. I couldn't. I was trying to understand how two versions of the same man could exist. The Adam who stayed awake with me after my father's funeral. The Adam who surprised me with flowers on difficult anniversaries. The Adam who held my hand whenever life became too heavy. and the man I just watched calmly discuss taking control of the home my father had made possible. "There's more," Harold said quietly. I looked up. "What?" I checked the backup server. He reached into a desk drawer and placed a small flash drive beside the laptop. That wasn't the only recording. I stared at it. There are 12 separate recordings. 12? He nodded slowly. "They met several times while you were at work." My chest tightened. 12. I copied every single file. He gently pushed the drive toward me. Video, audio, timestamps. Nothing has been altered. I picked it up. It weighed almost nothing. Yet somehow, it felt heavier than the keys to my house. "I don't know how to thank you." Harold shook his head. "You don't owe me gratitude." He looked toward the window for a long moment before speaking again. "My wife and I spent 33 years building memories in that house. We laughed there. We cried there. We grew old there." His voice became softer. "I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent while someone tried to build their future on a lie inside those same walls." I nodded, unable to speak. As I stood to leave, Harold walked me to the front door. Just before I stepped outside, he stopped me. "Mrs. Lawson?" I turned. "May I offer one piece of advice? Please." He looked directly into my eyes. "Don't let anger decide your next move." I waited. "Let evidence do it." Outside, the afternoon sun felt strangely cold. I sat inside my car for several minutes without starting the engine. The flash drive rested in my palm. I kept replaying Adam's words. "She trusts me. She'll never read it. Perfect." For the first time in 11 years, I realized I had never actually questioned the man sleeping beside me every night. I had trusted him because I loved him, and he had counted on exactly that. By the time I started the engine, the tears had stopped. Something else had taken their place. Not rage, not revenge. Something quieter. Something far more dangerous. A plan. I wasn't going to confront Adam. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. If he believed I was still the trusting wife he'd been manipulating, then that was exactly the woman I intended to become. At least, until he had absolutely no idea he'd already lost. I walked back into my house just before sunset, carrying the smallest object that had ever changed my life. The flash drive disappeared into the inside pocket of my handbag before I opened the front door. By the time I stepped inside, my smile was back. "So," Adam called from the kitchen, "did you ever find the paint samples?" I almost laughed. I had completely forgotten my excuse. "No," I answered, slipping off my shoes. "The store was out of the colors I wanted." "Try again tomorrow." "I will." Margaret was standing at the island arranging dishes inside newly unpacked cabinets. She looked up with her usual pleasant smile. "We made a lot of progress while you were gone." "I can see that." The kitchen looked different. Not because they'd unpacked more boxes, because somehow it already felt less like mine. Margaret had rearranged nearly every cabinet. The plates I had carefully organized that morning had been moved. The glasses were somewhere else. Even my father's old coffee mug, the one I'd carried through 3 different homes over the years, had disappeared from the shelf where I'd placed it. "I moved a few things," Margaret said casually. "I hope you don't mind." I forced another smile. "It looks nice." She nodded, completely satisfied. "I knew you'd appreciate it." Only a few hours earlier, I would have believed that was kindness. Now, I saw something else. Possession. Someone slowly making herself comfortable inside a life that wasn't hers. Dinner that evening was strangely ordinary. Adam talked about work. Margaret discussed a charity fundraiser she planned to attend. The television played softly in the background. Anyone looking through the dining room window would have seen an ordinary family sharing another peaceful evening together. No one would have guessed that one person at the table knew every smile was built on deception. I watched Adam more carefully than I ever had before. The way he answered questions, the way he glanced toward his mother before making certain decisions, the tiny expressions that lasted less than a second. They had always been there. I simply hadn't been looking. When dinner ended, Adam carried 2 envelopes into the living room. "Oh," he said casually. "Some paperwork finally arrived." My heart skipped. He laid the envelopes on the coffee table without opening them. "I'll go through it tomorrow." I nodded. "Anything important?" "Probably just routine ownership updates." Routine. That word almost made me angry. Instead, I smiled. "I'm glad you're handling all of that." His face relaxed immediately. The relief was almost impossible to miss. You know, paperwork gives you headaches. It really does. Another lie. From that moment forward, lying became surprisingly easy. Not because I enjoyed it, because honesty had become dangerous. The next morning, I left for work exactly as usual. Instead of driving downtown, I parked 3 streets away from a quiet brick office building. A polished brass sign beside the entrance read, Nathan Pierce, Real Estate Attorney. Harold Bennett had recommended him before I left. If anyone can protect you, he'd said, it's Nathan. The receptionist greeted me politely before leading me into a modest office lined with shelves full of legal books. Nathan Pierce looked nothing like the television lawyers I'd grown up watching. There was no expensive suit, no dramatic confidence, just a gray-haired man in his late 50s with reading glasses resting low on his nose and a legal pad already waiting on his desk. Mrs. Lawson? He stood and shook my hand. Please have a seat. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. So do I. For the next hour, I told him everything. The mysterious phone call, the hidden recording, the conversations, the trust documents, Harold Bennett, Margaret, Adam, every detail. Nathan interrupted only to ask specific questions. Did anyone besides your husband contribute significant funds toward purchasing the property? No. Do you still have proof of your inheritance? Yes. Were you ever informed that a family trust would become part of the ownership structure? Never. He nodded and made another note. Finally, I handed him the flash drive. There are 12 recordings. He plugged it into his computer. Neither of us spoke while the first video played. Nathan's expression never changed. He simply watched, occasionally writing something in the margins of his legal pad. When the recording ended, he removed his glasses. Mrs. Lawson, I need to ask you something. I braced myself. Do you still intend to sign whatever documents your husband puts in front of you? No. Good. He folded his hands together and tapped, because if these recordings accurately represent what they're planning, those papers could permanently change your financial future. I swallowed. So Harold was right. He was. Nathan reached into a file drawer and removed a thick legal reference book. He opened it to several highlighted pages. What they're attempting isn't simple theft. It's much more sophisticated. He looked directly at me. They appear to be using a private family trust. I don't understand. Think of it as placing your home inside another legal container. He grabbed a blank sheet of paper. This circle, he drew one large circle, is your house. Inside it, he drew another. This smaller circle is the trust. If you unknowingly transfer ownership into that trust, the trustee gains tremendous authority. I frowned. And Adam becomes the trustee? If the documents are written the way he described, yes. He tapped the paper. Once that happens, your legal rights become much more limited. I felt my stomach tighten. What could he actually do? Nathan didn't hesitate. He could refinance the property, borrow against it, sell portions of surrounding land, use the home's equity, in certain situations, even sell the house. Without asking me, the room became completely silent. I stared at the drawing on his desk. Everything my father had spent a lifetime building, reduced to a few circles on a piece of paper. Nathan quietly slid the paper aside. Fortunately, they've made one mistake. I looked up. They've underestimated you. He smiled faintly, and more importantly, they've underestimated time. What do you mean? They're expecting your signature. They don't yet realize they've already exposed their intentions. He opened another folder. There are several protective measures we can file immediately. What kind of measures? He began listing them. A property restriction notice, enhanced ownership verification, independent legal review requirements, anti-transfer safeguards. Each document sounded more reassuring than the last. What does all that actually mean? Nathan leaned back. It means no one. Not your husband. Not a trustee. Not a lender. Can alter ownership of your home without your direct personal authorization under strict legal review. Relief washed over me. So the house will be safe? Completely. I closed my eyes for a second. For the first time since Harold's phone call, I could finally breathe. Nathan wasn't finished. However, I looked back at him. If you truly want to protect yourself, don't tell them. Not yet. They believe you're still trusting. They believe you're about to cooperate. He leaned forward. That belief is your greatest advantage, I considered his words. So, I keep pretending. Exactly. The more comfortable they become, the more careless they'll get. And careless people create evidence. Evidence. Harold had said almost the same thing. Don't let anger decide your next move. Let evidence do it. Nathan slid a legal contract across the desk. If you're willing, I'll begin filing everything this afternoon. I signed immediately, not because I trusted blindly anymore, because this time I had read every single page, every line, every signature block, every clause. Nathan noticed. A small smile crossed his face. Your husband may have taught you a painful lesson. He gathered the papers, but he'll probably regret teaching it. For the next several days, I became the version of Rebecca Lawson they expected to see. The cheerful wife, the trusting partner, the woman who hated paperwork. Every morning I kissed Adam goodbye. Every evening I listened patiently while Margaret discussed furniture, renovations, and decorating ideas. I laughed. I cooked dinner. I thanked Adam for handling everything. Behind the performance, another version of me quietly came to life. I opened a private email account under a name no one would recognize. Every document I found was photographed. Every suspicious conversation was written down with dates and times. I bought a tiny digital voice recorder no larger than a pack of gum. It stayed inside my cardigan pocket whenever Margaret visited. At night, after Adam fell asleep, I compared every page of the trust documents with the copies Nathan had requested. One evening, just after midnight, I found it, buried on page 17. 3 paragraphs, hidden beneath dense legal language. One sentence that made my blood run cold. The managing trustee shall possess exclusive authority to administer, finance, transfer, or otherwise manage trust assets whenever deemed beneficial to the trust's interests. I read it again, then a fourth time. There it was. Exactly as Harold's recording had described. Exactly as Nathan had warned. They weren't asking me to sign routine paperwork. They were asking me to surrender control of the house my father had sacrificed his entire life to give me. I quietly photographed the page, sent it to Nathan, then carefully returned every document to the exact place Adam had left it. The next morning, he smiled over breakfast. So, what did you think? I buttered another piece of toast. It looked pretty standard. His shoulders relaxed. I'm glad. I figured you'd trust me. I smiled back. I always have. He smiled. Margaret smiled. Neither of them noticed that while they believed they were one signature away from winning, the trap around them had already begun to close. The strangest part wasn't pretending to trust my husband. It was discovering how quickly he stopped pretending to earn that trust. The moment Adam believed I'd accepted the paperwork without question, he changed. Not overnight. Not dramatically. Just little things. The carefulness disappeared. The hesitation vanished. He started talking about the house as though every decision already belonged to him. It happened one Saturday morning while we were drinking coffee on the back porch. The sun had barely risen over the maple trees lining the backyard. I was looking at the empty flower beds, imagining the tomatoes and roses my father and I had once planned to grow together. Adam folded the newspaper and looked toward the garage. You know, we should probably knock that wall down. I looked at him. Which wall? The one separating the garage from the workshop. Why? I could turn it into my office. I smiled politely. I thought we agreed that room would become Dad's library. He laughed. We can always make a library somewhere else. Somewhere else. Not impossible. Just moved. Like my father's dream had quietly become negotiable. I guess we'll see. He nodded confidently. We've got plenty of time. The words sounded harmless. Now they felt calculated. Everything had become weave. Our decisions, our plans, but somehow, every one of those plans seemed to benefit Adam far more than me. Margaret became even bolder. She no longer asked permission before changing things around the house. She simply acted. One afternoon, I came home from work and found her measuring the living room walls. What are you doing? She smiled. I'm checking dimensions. For what? A custom entertainment center. I frowned. We haven't talked about buying one. You will. She laughed softly, as though the decision had already been made. Adam walked in carrying groceries. I actually like Mom's idea. Of course he did. Margaret folded the measuring tape. The house has wonderful bones. It just needs someone willing to make real decisions. Real decisions. I noticed she never included me in that sentence. A few days later, I was watering flowers near the front porch when Margaret's SUV pulled into the driveway. She stepped out carrying several paint samples. I found these yesterday. She spread them across the kitchen island. I think the dining room should be darker. Adam agreed immediately. I like this one. Margaret pointed toward another. And eventually, this wall comes out. She tapped the blueprint she'd brought with her. The kitchen opens into the dining room. We replace the staircase railing. The fireplace gets natural stone. She continued describing renovation after renovation. Neither of them noticed. They never once asked what I wanted. They spoke around me, not with me, like I was simply another person attending a meeting about someone else's house. I quietly excused myself. I need another cup of coffee. Inside the pantry, I pressed the record button on the small voice recorder hidden inside my sweater. When I returned, Margaret was saying exactly what Nathan hoped she eventually would. The sooner the trust is finalized, the easier all of this becomes. Adam nodded. No delays. No unnecessary approvals. Exactly. The recorder captured every word. That evening, my phone vibrated. Nathan, how are they behaving? More confident every day. Good. I frowned. Good? The more confident they become, the less careful they'll be. I couldn't argue with that. They've already started discussing renovations as though they own everything. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Excellent. I almost laughed. I don't think I've ever heard someone call fraud excellent. I'm calling evidence excellent. He paused. People rarely confess intentionally. They confess because they believe they're safe. Friday evening brought another surprise. Adam came home carrying an expensive bottle of wine. We should celebrate. What are we celebrating? He smiled. The paperwork's finally finished. My heart skipped. So soon? The attorney completed everything. He kissed my forehead. We only need one more signature. Mine? I nodded slowly. When? I was thinking Monday. Before I could answer, Margaret walked through the front door. Perfect timing. I already arranged the notary. She smiled warmly. He can come right here to the house. Everything had already been planned. Without asking me. Again, I looked at both of them, then smiled. Monday works. Neither of them could hide their excitement. Margaret's eyes brightened instantly. Adam reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I knew you'd understand. Understand. The irony almost hurt. Saturday afternoon, I met Nathan in the parking lot of a quiet coffee shop nearly 40 miles away. He climbed into my car carrying another thick folder. Everything's finished. He handed me copies of every filing, property protections, ownership restrictions, legal notices, independent verification requirements. Each document had already been recorded with the county. Nathan smiled. Your house is now one of the most legally protected residential properties in Tennessee. I laughed for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. So even if I accidentally signed, you won't. I know, but hypothetically, he nodded, the transfer would still fail. I exhaled slowly. Thank you. Nathan closed his folder. We're almost there. There is one more thing. What? When they bring out those papers, don't refuse. I looked at him. Don't refuse? Pick up the pen. Pretend you're going to sign. I stared. The closer they believe they are, the more devastating the truth becomes. It felt almost theatrical. Nathan smiled slightly. Sometimes justice needs timing. Sunday evening became the final piece of evidence. Adam found me washing dishes after dinner. He wrapped his arms around my waist, a gesture that once made me feel completely safe. Now, I barely recognized the man behind it. You've been amazing. I kept rinsing another plate. Why? Not questioning everything. He kissed my temple. I know paperwork stresses you out. It does. You won't have to worry much longer. I remained silent. His voice dropped lower. Once Monday's done, I'll handle everything from then on. I looked down into the sink. What do you mean? He smiled. I mean all the complicated decisions. You won't even notice. I'll make sure life stays easy for you. Behind the fabric of my cardigan, the recorder quietly captured every syllable. I asked one final question. So after tomorrow, I won't really have to think about the house anymore? He chuckled. Exactly. That's the beauty of it. You'll wake up one morning, and everything important will already be taken care of. I closed my eyes for just a second. Not because I was emotional, because I finally had it. His confession. Simple, natural, completely voluntary. He believed he was reassuring his wife. Instead, he had just destroyed his own future. Monday arrived. The house looked beautiful. Margaret had insisted on fresh flowers. Candles decorated the dining table. The expensive wine waited beside polished crystal glasses. Anyone walking through the front door would have believed we were celebrating a family milestone. In a way, we were, just not the one Adam imagined. He wore his favorite navy suit. Margaret dressed as though she were attending an awards banquet. I wore the pearl necklace my father had given me on my 40th birthday. It reminded me why I was doing all of this. Not for revenge, for him, for everything he'd sacrificed. As dinner ended, Adam disappeared into the study. He returned carrying the leather portfolio I'd seen in Harold Bennett's recording. He placed it carefully in front of me. Inside, the trust documents waited. Alongside them rested a polished silver pen. Margaret smiled. No pressure, dear. Whenever you're comfortable. I looked from the papers to Adam to Margaret. Neither of them noticed my heartbeat had become perfectly calm, because this wasn't their victory. It was the final act of their mistake. I reached for the pen. Adam smiled. Margaret held her breath, and somewhere beyond the front gate, a black sedan turned onto our street, exactly on time. The room fell silent as I wrapped my fingers around the silver pen. Adam smiled across the table. Margaret leaned forward, unable to hide her excitement. This is the beginning of a wonderful future, she said softly. I smiled back. It certainly is. I lowered the pen toward the signature line. Before the tip touched the paper, the doorbell rang. Adam frowned. We're not expecting anyone. I'll get it, I said calmly. When I opened the front door, Nathan Pierce stood on the porch in a charcoal suit carrying a leather briefcase. Beside him stood Deputy Samuel Ortiz, holding a sealed folder. Good evening, Mrs. Lawson, Nathan said. I believe this is the appropriate time. I stepped aside. Please come in. The smiles disappeared from Adam and Margaret's faces the moment they entered the dining room. What is this? Adam asked, standing abruptly. Nathan placed his briefcase on the table. I'm here on behalf of my client, Rebecca Lawson. He opened the case and carefully laid several documents beside the trust agreement. Earlier this week, Mrs. Lawson legally secured exclusive ownership protections over this property. No ownership transfer, trust registration, refinance, or financial authority can take effect without her independent legal approval. Adam's face went pale. Rebecca, what is he talking about? Nathan continued without raising his voice. We also have evidence showing this trust agreement was presented under false pretenses. He placed printed transcripts on the table, then screenshots from the hidden recordings, then copies of emails between Margaret and mortgage broker Karen Holloway. Finally, he pressed the play button on a small recorder. Adam's own voice filled the dining room. You'll wake up one morning, and everything important will already be taken care of. The room became completely silent. Margaret's confidence vanished. Adam stared at me in disbelief. How long have you known? I looked him directly in the eyes. Long enough to protect everything my father left me. Margaret finally spoke. This is ridiculous. We were trying to help our family. Nathan slid another document across the table. Helping your family doesn't require hiding legal authority inside trust documents. Neither of them had another answer. Deputy Ortiz served the legal notices and quietly explained that any future attempt to interfere with the property's ownership could result in further legal action. Adam slowly lowered himself into his chair. It wasn't supposed to end like this. I shook my head. No. It wasn't supposed to begin like this. Within an hour, Adam packed 2 suitcases and left the house. Margaret followed him without another word. As the front door closed behind them, the silence that filled the house no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful. The following spring, I planted the vegetable garden my father and I had always talked about. Every tomato vine, every flower, every quiet morning on that porch reminded me of one simple truth. Trust is a gift. Once someone uses it as a weapon, they should never be handed it again. Sometimes the strongest revenge isn't destroying the people who betrayed you. It's refusing to let them take one more thing from your life.